Well, welcome. Of course, as everybody knows, this is Municipal World sponsored session. We're going to meet them closer, but I want to welcome four wonderful friends and colleagues. Ian McCormick, who's from Alberta. Give a little wave, a little wave. Megan, who's from Huron County, Ontario. Little wave, there she is. Pam Mood, Mayor of Yarmouth. Little wave from Atlantic Canada. And we've got really happy to have all the coast represented. We've got Lisa Southern from Vancouver, British Columbia, a little wave. Wow. So we've got coast to coast, wonderful people to kind of guide us. You know, I put this little slide up because it's just a reminder, I think, why this is so important, what we're doing today. These are just clips from 2 weeks ago when I prepared this. In 1 week, these were the headlines that I got from Municipal World and Municipal News. And you just kind of browse through that and say, wow, you know. And I noticed since I did this, probably about another 20 different headlines. And you got to, you know, you look at that and you say, wow, that has a huge impact when you see headlines like that. You know, for elected officials, like, why would I want to run? For the public, and of course for staff. So just a little bit of context for what we're doing for today. So let's begin, because we'd like to find out, and this is our first poll, Nate. We got a bunch of polls that we're going to do, and maybe just tell us about your experience relative to incivility. That is it low, medium, or high? Like, do you see a lot of it, just a little bit, and low? And let's just get a feel for our audience, kind of what experiences they're having. And we might, you know, kind of take a look at that and think that it happens everywhere, right? It happens within council, it happens within staff, it happens between council and staff. I'm finding that it's even happening, you know, interfacing with the public, right? Just kind of a different thing. So we're just going to spend like 30 seconds here and just put my glasses on. And let's see, we've got kind of medium to high. Looks like we've got about 25 people so far out of the 42. And so, yeah, seems like a fair amount of experience. And the reason we asked that question is because we want this to be real time. We've got some wonderful guests who are going to share tools, experiences, but where we want to get to is applying ideas to the issues that you're facing. So, you know, no matter where you go, and I think I pressed to share results. There's the results. And now remind me, sorry. Can you still see the PowerPoint, Ian? We're good? Okay, thanks.
I can, but I think you need to click share results if you want others to see them.
Oh, yeah.
Else, just us.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Can you see them now? Okay, well, I'll read them out. 67% medium, 20% high, and 13% low. And I'm going to stop sharing. I think everybody could see it. Okay, let me back out of here and close that. Okay, so it doesn't matter where you go. There's rules, right? You know, I went to a baseball game in Washington to see the Nationals, and there's rules. If you go to anywhere, if there's fouls, that you can replay it, and there's a referee. But you know what happens in local government, generally we're kind of on our own. So it makes it all the more reason there isn't some super cop, if you will, or police that comes in and can fix things. So it's up to us to actually take a look at how we improve respectful leadership or civility. So, and generally, and you can tell me, but I think we're going to see that gradually we've seen a decline of the code. And I just wanted to go to Ian to really talk about, you know, what civility or respectful leadership means in about 10 seconds. So what are we going to do today? Okay, that was a heads up.
Sorry, do you want an introduction in 10 seconds or civility in 10 seconds?
Civility in 10 seconds. Well, you can do both, actually.
Oh, well, do unto others, I suppose, is 10 seconds worth. But
Yeah.
you mentioned too, Gord, that this incivility or lack of civility is affecting council, it's affecting administration, and it's affecting staff in the multiple interactions. So there's a really big matrix there. And what we see is not necessarily the dictionary definition either. It's not just councils. I mentioned do unto others. To me, it's civility is believing that we want each other to succeed. And I'm a bit of a Pollyanna in that. And I think that that is true. I think civility is acting on a shared vision of either of success or whatever. I think it's also shared values of things like respect and accountability as well. So in the positive, that's kind of what I see. The incivility, of course, I'll bring up social media, but I'll just stop there if you just wanted the 10 seconds, which is longer.
Yeah. Well, I think you nailed it. Because I want our listeners and participants, because we're not listeners, hopefully we're going to be participants. Today we're not really dealing with ethics, ethical behavior. We're dealing with what I would call good manners, right? Civility, good people. How are we going to do that? Well, we're going to talk about context, and why do we see an increase in civility? We're going to take a look at how people react to situations by looking at character, and if you have a chance, I'd appreciate it if you'd look at your notepad. It does have a personality instrument that we need everybody to fill out. We're also going to take a look at conditions like real time. That's where we want you to bring forth specific ideas and challenges that you're facing, and then really deal with circumstances. So that's kind of where we're going to head for today. Okay, so sorry, Ian, I was saying I was going to come to you in 10 seconds. So let's look at what conditions foster incivility. And Lisa, who's a lawyer, but also recently been appointed the Integrity Commissioner for Vancouver. What conditions do you think foster disrespectful leadership or incivility?
I would say there's two fundamental components to that. One is a lack of shared knowledge and understanding about the sort of the current expectations of how humans are meant to interact in workplaces and do the work. And there's been a massive shift, I think, as we all know, around our awareness of social movements, human rights, and bullying and harassment in the workplace. And so just a shared common understanding of the baseline knowledge of the legal obligations and how folks need to do the work that they do today to be compliant is one. And then another one that I'm sure we're going to come up with again and again is clarity around roles and responsibilities. It's a really complex space where you've got folks elected on mandates and they are meant to make change. And you typically have staff that are resistant to change for a multitude of reasons. And sometimes those are grounded in fiduciary obligations or policy and legal requirements. Again, I know we're not touching on ethics today, but we see that misalignment there in terms of where the staff come from and where the elected officials are coming from in terms of their desire to make change and usually make change fairly rapidly. And it's in that lack of common understanding about those unique roles and responsibilities that I think we really see that incivility flow. I would just say we've already touched on the public and how the public interfaces with these groups as well. And I just think another moment in time here that we've got fostering incivility is just really profound polarization of politics and views and about how we put forward our expression in this space today within the current social context. So that would be, I don't know if I was 15 seconds, but that would be my.
Oh, yeah. No, wonderful. And you see it. And I want to thank Stuart for telling me I was in presenter view. So thanks, Stuart. Thanks. I appreciate feedback. So we all are aware of conditions I use the analogy, and Lisa and I were chatting about this last week. I think there are conditions that cause good people to do dumb things based on their personality, and whether that's processes or not being heard, etc. So when we look at this, there are consequences for incivility or disrespectful behavior. So let's go just round table with our guests, but feel free to use the chat to add. We will have some chat rooms coming up in very shortly, but in the meantime, use a chat to indicate. So I want to just go to Pam, of course, who is a mayor in Yarmouth. She's been there several years, many years. What do you think is the impact on you?
On me as mayor?
Mm-hmm.
Oh gosh, I've never thought of that one, because I don't let anything really affect me too much. You know, as the leader, that people are looking at me and how is this council run? Everything's on television, it's online, it's everywhere. You know, what are people thinking? And I can say this, you'll all get a laugh. Before my time, our town council was known as Clown Council. It was such a circus. We've gotten that town council back. You know, the effect on me and actually all of us is that lack of engagement of that public demographic that really cares about the community, because they just don't want to put up with it, so they won't engage. We find the wrong people running for office. So we want the right people at the table, not somebody that wants to be, you know, a showboat or something like that. So, you know, when incivility, I find, leads to people using council as a stage, and it just doesn't work. You know, the bad decisions get made because the focus isn't on the issues. It's unsafe for the good guys. Safety is key. I want my council, and Gord, you've heard me before. I've said in every session we've done, I've got a dream council. That wasn't the case the first term, but I learned within 3 months how to handle that. I've got a dream team, and I think it's because they're safe, and there's things that I do to make sure that they're safe at the table. The repercussions for staff are horrific when there's incivility at the table. No trust, no good can come of that. We're focusing on the wrong things, you know, not being prepared and making the right decisions. We blame everybody else because the decisions are wrong and the public's upset. And respect is wrong. And I have to say this the right way. There's a lack of respect when the public sees us behaving like that with bad manners. There's a lack of respect for council, who the public would say so obviously lost respect for the community if they think that this is okay. And frankly, you know, the last piece I would say is that community growth slows considerably, or it halts, or it goes backwards because everybody's focused on the wrong thing. It gets that bad.
Well, you've covered a lot of ground there. And so I think a couple of our participants have said, you know, there's mistrust, lack of confidence in what you're doing, sort of like these are personal impacts. But let's go to what the impact is on colleagues. And I'm going to go to Ian. So a little bit about you know, how you would feel in a incivility situation. But what's the impact of disrespectful leadership on colleagues, whether that's administration or elected officials? Ian?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, I think it's going to start with council, because council, of course, is the board of directors that's hired to mind the shop between elections. So they are the ones who are setting direction. And I've yet to find a contested election which isn't about change. Sometimes acclaimed people are happy with the way things are. So it's about change, and then we start getting into ideas. So collegially, I think some of the issues that happen are, if there is a fear of incivility, you end up with people arguing about people rather than ideas. You find polarization really happening, and that limits the scope of what ideas are. Fewer people are willing to raise trial balloons, to float new ideas, to come up with new things. It narrows that debate down, and I don't think that's healthy for anyone. And the ultimate outcome of that, I think, in terms of collegial or colleagues, is we start to see a greater rise in populism, where we see short-term gain for long-term pain, because the shortest route is the one which keeps the people happy and the noisiest people happy over the short term, without necessarily looking at the long-term good of the community. And I can imagine particularly for career administrators who are really good at their jobs, that's got to be so frustrating, seeing what ought to be done not being done, for some sense of fear from members of council or members of administration that there's going to be this incivility and retribution. So those are some of the consequences I'd see.
Wow. And you brought up a couple, administration. So it's a good segue to Megan about what do you think is the impact of incivility? And that could be from council or within administration. What's the impact on staff?
Yeah, so I mean, I think as CAO, one of the things that I see is sort of decision paralysis on behalf of staff, because they're afraid of bringing forward their best ideas because they're not sure how they're going to be received. And as a council, I think, and as an administration, you always want your best talent to be bringing the best ideas forward. And when you're working in an environment where there isn't safety, or there is the threat of incivility, I think it really has an impact on the quality of work that is done corporately. I think it's really hard to retain staff in that environment as well, quite frankly, with the job market the way that it is. The best and the brightest don't have to put up with that sort of atmosphere, and they're not going to stay. They're going to move on. And again, as caretakers for the communities that we serve, it's our responsibility to try and make sure that we're creating an environment, supporting an environment where they want to stay and contribute. I think those would be my two. The other one, and this is subtle, but the other one is, there's the potential for staff, rather than putting forward their best ideas, for them to try and sway the recommendation to what they think council may want them to be saying, and out of fear, putting forward ideas that maybe aren't in necessarily the best interest of the municipality. So you really need to create a safe environment where your best and your brightest have an opportunity to provide you with the best possible advice.
Oh, good point. And Pierre actually reinforces an environment where you can be fearless, right, in providing good quality advice. Daryl brings up a point and we'll get there, around preventing situations. And I forget who it was. Somebody else talks about, what if you just have bad people, right? They don't even, want to acknowledge they're bad. So stay tuned. We're going to get there, because we're going to talk about preventive measures and also remedial measures. So we'll hopefully get to both. But let's end sort of the consequences, which is really why we should care. And some have already introduced this idea, but what's the impact on government generally? And let's go to Lisa to wrap up why we should care about this consequences. Lisa.
Well, and I think it touches on government, but on all of the points that we've referenced here, be it colleagues or staff or council to council. And I'm going to actually draw from some of the terminology in the City of Vancouver's respectful workplace policy, which applies to the employees. It's really well framed at the beginning. It talks about the purpose of the policy being this notion that we want everyone to stay on mission. And when we have these behaviors that are in incivility or beyond, the entire enterprise goes off mission. And nobody accomplishes their goals, whether it's the elected officials, government, whether it's the staff. And it's that way from a host of different perspectives. Like budget is part of it. If we're all mired in these investigations, they're expensive, costly processes, and the costs associated with the time and the sort of human emotional capital that goes into it, but also just the sheer cost. And, those dollars no longer being attributed to the missions that the government has as its mandate. Somebody else touched on the idea that the community loses confidence. And so, public trust is so vital in the work of the elected officials. And when you lose public trust, that the leaders can lead and lead in an effective way, and then we're really in a complicated space. The reality is, with limited legislative ability, the government's going to be the government until the next election flows, and that's a long period of time for those that elected the folks to sit in a space of mistrust that the government can actually lead. And then you get other layers of oversight, right? And you get other layers of intervention, which we've seen across the provinces, trying to manage these dynamics from that kind of integrity commissioner model, or imposing the codes of conduct, et cetera. And so then you lose something of the local flavor too, because you have other layers of government stepping in and creating an oversight function out of necessity, when at its heart, we would hope that these governments can come to the work in a manner that fosters public trust, not undermines it. So some thoughts there.
Yeah, excellent. And maybe another one is intergovernmental relations. Other municipalities or other levels, when they see a dysfunctional council, are less likely to want to partner with them. So we've got community trust. This was just one to highlight what Lisa was just chatting about. So let's do our second poll, and Nate will bring that up. What do you see as some of the major reasons for incivility before we move to our next stage? And while we're doing the poll, an analogy I like to use is, if we're driving a car and the wheels aren't aligned, we waste a lot of energy trying to stay on the road. And I would propose the same is true for local government, Indigenous government, regional government boards. Is if we're not aligned around our behavioral expectations, we're going to waste a lot of energy that should be devoted to actually serving our public. And so let's look at, well, we got a couple latecomers coming in there, Nate. Let's look. Oh, wow, we're getting a lot of response here. And so this whole idea of the impact that it has on you, the impact it has on colleagues,
see the human
impact it
being
has
speaking
on staff is very important. We're
I
also
can't hear
seeing
them.
somebody needs to mute their mic there.
I just muted him.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ian. Wish we could always do that, right?
Their audio. I've
Yeah.
never, not a single time have I ever had.
Okay, so let's, I'm going to end the poll, and let's, I'm hoping I'm sharing the results. Somebody let me know. Can you see the results? The results are social media activity. Oh, no, the highest one is a colleague citing inaccurate information, right? Factoids. Second one is social media activity, has a huge impact. Colleagues' inappropriate behavior, just mannerism. Some of you on the chat have mentioned language, or shrugging, or body language. And another one is inadequate staff information can cause good people to get frustrated. So hopefully you can see that, and I'll stop sharing. Okay.
Gord, before you do, I'm sorry,
go ahead,
you don't mind
Ian.
if I
Yeah,
jump
please.
in for a moment.
Yeah.
17 people, as you recognize, said our colleague is citing inaccurate information. I'd be interested in kind of what that actually means from anybody who might have picked that.
Yeah.
If
So
that's
let's
okay.
use chat if it gives some examples, and it could very much be so-and-so told me, or I went online and got some information. But yeah, so people who kind of indicated that would be great if you can just use chat, or just to kind of give us some insights what that actually means. Pierre, would it be okay if you use chat? Because just cognizant that we want to be cautious of how much, we got a couple more people joining us. So let's arrive at where we're at. What we've said is there's a rise in incivility, which has caused decreased public confidence. It's caused legislation across the country to have codes, integrity commissioners, etc. It has huge consequences on you, your colleagues, administration, the public. So those, that's kind of the context we work in. Now we want to take a look at you, people. And so we're going to take a look at character, which is, and I'm going to show you, for many of you, you may have been able to do this before, but we're going to take a couple minutes because I think it's important with that argument that good people do dumb things when processes don't work or other people are disrespectful. So let me very quickly show you how to fill out this. If this takes you longer than 5-7 minutes, you're taking it way too seriously. Okay, so look at the first 4 words and describe what works for you. 1, 2, 3, 4. You can't say I like 1, and I can't say I like that one as 1. It's a 1, a 2, a 3, and a 4. You go to the next set of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Everybody got it? You're just doing it. Now, for today, because I know we've got awesome people online, you don't actually need to fill out the left side. What I need you to fill out is the right side and fill in these boxes. The hardest thing you will do during this session is add up those 4 scores. Get a calculator, call a friend, okay? And once you've got your 4 scores, the test is it adds up to 80, okay? So there you go. Now, once you have that, go to the next page that's in your notepad and circle those 4 scores. So we're going to give everybody just a couple of minutes to do your best to circle the 4 scores that you come up and just kind of play with that for a bit. So with, and then we're going to go to chat rooms to talk about it. So there are all kinds of psychometric instruments, Myers-Briggs, DISC, or whatever. And often we find that particularly in the orientation process, and I know, Ian, you do a lot of orientations sessions, and, we work on values, as you mentioned. We work on priorities, strategic priorities, et cetera. Do you find we spend much time on just understanding each other's style or personalities?
No, and not only that, but if a council or a board or a commission or whomever are brought together by the voters, they didn't get to pick either their colleagues, their teammates. And some of it there may be some historical animosity. There may not have good role clarity. There may be some people who are just mad and chose to put themselves on a ballot. There may be those who, and this showed up in the chat too, about who delve far too much into operations. So there are all kinds of reasons that this can happen within a council. And during an orientation, which if done formally fairly soon after the election, most of the time, of course, our elections are fall and in Canada, and that's budget time too. So even if there are discussions that happen around this topic, it's sometimes just part of the whole fire hose that people are hit with. And to gain some practical experience is necessary before this can really be revisited to do this understanding. And we often talk to elected officials about their inherent personality traits and some of the ones they adapt when they are sitting around a council bench. Same thing goes for administrators as well. And if our fundamental belief is we want each other to be successful, then maybe it works out fairly well. If, however, we're looking for that gotcha moment, it doesn't work very well at all. So it's this something that has to be done at the beginning, but then it also has to be reinforced to understand individuals as colleagues, as work colleagues, but also as humans with families and other jobs sometimes, and stresses that they have in their normal lives too.
Well, if we look at elected officials, it's not like they joined a team or a service club, right? They got elected, And I know Christina does this work as well, Christina Benty. And it's like there's a honeymoon period, you know, you got elected and we're going to do great things. And then you go, oh, this person rambles on, or this person's harsh, right? And so it's getting an appreciation that people think differently, they speak differently, and they act differently. And that's the nature of our wonderful society. So hopefully most of you have taken the time. Stuart asked, where is the personality instrument? It's in your notepad that was sent out. If you don't have it because you signed up just recently, Nate put it in the top of the chat. There is a place to download it. So let me just show you how to look at this tool. So if you've circled your 4 scores, you can see this person has a bit of a problem. Their 2 lowest scores, which are 17 and 17, are tied. So they're going to go to the bottom and break that tie. So let's watch how they break the tie. And now we see that their lowest number, which is a bit of a awkward because it's actually higher in the chart, okay? But their lowest number in this case is actually 18. That means their most dominant letter is C. I know everybody was going to say that, C. For anybody who, you've got the notepad, but if you ever want to use this, I wouldn't necessarily use it as a party favor kind of project. And be careful when you use it with your partner or spouse. Just saying, okay? But if you do use it, this person actually has their lowest score is 18. And just a reminder, you may want to write this down. Anything within 2 gets added in. So let's take a look at what this actually means. And again, we're doing this very quickly. This is not meant to be a psychometric test today. But there are those people who are very outgoing. They're very sociable. And that's the positive. But they also have a lot of ideas. You know, they're the ones, hey, why don't we do this? Why don't we do that? You know, hey, we can do this. They talk to citizens and say, no problem, I'll go to administration, we'll get that done. You know those people, right? They love to be liked, and they have a hard time saying no. So what that means consequently is often they take on too much, or they're not so big necessarily on the follow-up. Don't worry, by the time we finish, I will have offended everybody in our session. Okay, so thank goodness only about 10% of an average North American population are outgoing and sociable. We'd have a lot of fun, but we might not ever get anything done. Then we have those who are dominant style is A, action-oriented. They need to be moving. In fact, often when I do this with a group, they're the ones wondering, why are we doing this touchy-feely exercise right now, right? They love action. They hate to be still. And if that's not annoying enough, they only like their results. So those are the ones that are very assertive, my way or the highway, and damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. Better to ask for forgiveness than permission. 10% average population are very action-oriented.
They're friggin' awesome.
Yeah. Well, let's take a look at this though, because back to Ian. Ian said, when you have a change on council, and hey, let's look. In the last 2 years, we've had 80% of the country go to local elections, and on average, a 50% turnover on council. And what do they like, Ian? Change.
Oh, there we go. Yes, change, Gord.
So let's look at this chart. 10%, hey, it's all good. And then the A's are there. Hey, if it ain't broke, let's break the sucker. Let's rock, right? They love change. 80% average population hate change. So we got the S's. They're steady, stable people. They're thinkers. You know them. They're the ones. I was thinking about that motion we made an hour ago. Can we revisit that? Because I kind of thought some new ideas. Or they're the ones, have we consulted with everybody on this? So for them, team building, relationship, thinking things out is very important. And now the thing you got to know about S's, because you may think, you know, these O's and A's are the dominant styles that we need to concern. S's are hard to see sometimes. And when you annoy an S, like when an O is too boisterous or an A is too strong, S's go off like a teapot. It's a very shrill sound when you upset people who are dominant S. Well, let's go to the last one. I'm doing this very quickly. The C's. Now we do them last, usually because they need to re-add the scores. Just make sure it's correct. Maybe go online and check the validity and reliability of the instrument. They need information. They need to know, why are we doing this? You know, what's the reason for doing this? What's the validity? And if that's not annoying enough, they hate to be wrong. You say, I think you got your facts wrong. Wow, look out. Now, I've offended everybody. Okay, let's go back. Hey, the C's keep us out of trouble. They actually read the code of conduct, the policies. In fact, they've read the Local Government Act inside and out. We got the steady and stable people. They're the ones that make sure we can work together. We can talk about things. We can resolve things. And then we have the A's. They're the ones who actually make sure we're going somewhere. There's actually a hill to climb. We're actually trying to achieve something. And then there's the O's. You know, Pam's an O. We're not quite sure about the O's. No, the O's they're the cheerleaders, right? They're the ones, hey, everything's good. Let's get back on track. And so we've got all these styles. So I want to very quickly try for today to show you we all have a personality. Hey, this is a simple instrument. We're way more complex than this. For example, even if you're a certain style, right? You might, Pam's in denial already. Maybe you're an AOC. Well, you know, take a look at this. No, just for a minute, if you think about these different styles, we change, right? I mean, the most important competency of leaders is what we call behavioral complexity. And that's the ability to adapt our style without losing our virtues and values to the situation. But for many people, they don't adapt their style to the situation. So their dominant style comes out. And that's really the point. So we're just going to quickly take a look at this. We got the O. I had to put in my diving pictures here. The O, you know where they are. They're outgoing. We got the meat eaters, right? The A's, right? If it ain't broke, let's break the sucker. We've got the S's, kind of hard to see. You know, they're kind of maybe sitting on the kind of the edge, you know, they're thinking about things. And then, of course, we've got the C, who loves get down, get dirty, get into detail, and ask a lot of questions. So you've already labeled your colleagues, I'm sure, or your staff. So we're going to quickly, not for a long time on this one, because I just want to set the tone that when processes and procedures and behaviors don't work, good people do dumb things. So we're going to go to a chat room very quickly, and just want you to think about a behavior or two for any personality that you want to highlight. And how would that contribute to a group or inhibit? So in other words, every style has a plus or a negative, right? A positive or a negative.
Or can I just say something about?
Yeah, absolutely, Pam.
Yeah. So no, it's Megan. So one of the things I would say, we actually, when we were onboarding the new council, we went through and we spent, I don't know, we spent a good working day looking at behavior, sort of understanding each other. One of the things that was really interesting to me is I thought that I understood the council and their behaviors and their types. And it actually was very different than reality. And so, you know, being really careful about making assumptions of who are at the table and the way that they behave. So, you know, just I would highly, highly recommend doing this sort of work with a council early on, just so that you and others around you can understand where they're coming from, and just be cautious about making too many assumptions.
Yeah, I mean, we don't want to start doing, falsehoods. I remember working with one council, remain nameless, but they actually put the letters on their name plates, and it was a reminder. Oh, because one of our participants said, it's not that you ask questions, it's the way you ask a question that puts staff in a defensive mode, right? So it was a reminder, that's who you are. You like to ask questions, and there's so many of you will have facilitators who colors, disc, Myers-Briggs, right? There's lots of tools out there. And yeah, I like that, Cindy. Be curious, seek to understand, where's that coming from? Why is that person like that? So let's quickly go to a chat room. Not for long, probably just going to do like a quick 7 minutes here, Nate, and come back, just kind of quickly chat about, how does every style have a positive or negative impact? Or even what are the triggers for you, right? So let's go to chat rooms. Here we go. Well, I think we've got people coming back. And good to see Brian's with us. Just looking at some names here, familiar names, Brian and I think room 3 is coming.
This always reminds me of Romper Room. I don't know if you were.
Yeah.
Start coming back.
Okay, so I think we've got everybody back, Nate.
Still some people.
Almost. Okay.
I think almost. Actually, maybe they're all
Okay.
back.
Yeah, great. So I think the upshot, and this is not intended to be a psychometric exercise today. It was really just to introduce the idea of what you can do to avoid kind of inhibitor behavior. So let's use chat and any highlights from your discussion. And perhaps we can go to a poll if there's nothing. Okay. So Melissa's got a Dropbox. I'm not sure what that is, but the ability to it's a good point, Rachel, that you make. It's and really, others have mentioned it's not just about looking at others and assessing others, but it's also about looking at yourself, because we all have triggers. For example, I'm an OAS. And so for me, what I observe is C's can trigger me because, you're in the flow and all of a sudden they start asking questions, right? Or you can see an A style wanting to move to action. We got to get going with this. And then an S says, well, we need to consult with people before we do that, right? And so you can see how these different styles are not dysfunctional behaviors, actually. They can be confused as dysfunctional behaviors. Greg notes that wouldn't it be terrible if, in fact, everybody was the same, right? Everybody was the same style. The richness, I mean, the most wonderful groups have a bit of everything. One of the things I like to have fun with, if you think about administration, if you have finance, you would expect them to be C's. I don't necessarily mean the person, but C's. If you took a look at something like fire or police, you would expect them to be more of an A style, right? And of course, if you looked at recreation people, you might expect them to be more O style. So within administration, these professions can actually take on a certain style. For some of you, I've worked all over the world, and I think different cultures, not individuals, but even cultures can take on different style. So it's a very dynamic world that we look in. And so the idea that, I think I'm just moving that to, there was a question there. Trevor, what approach can be taken when one does not recognize their behaviors are triggering others? I think we're going to get to that, but unless there's one-on-one conversation, like you hope it doesn't escalate, that we have to do like investigations and all that kind of stuff. But it's really being brave without fear to talk to people. I have found, and I think Ian was sort of saying the same thing, sometimes just signaling out a person is bad. But if we could do it as a group, like the impact of these styles, then it doesn't kind of personalize, that person. So you might kind of want to do it more as a group. Cindy, you're absolutely right. We're way more complex than this. This is just a little flashlight, right? So let's kind of move, because we want to now think about you as an individual. I think somebody said seek to understand. Maybe before we jump to conclusions around how somebody's doing something, we just seek to understand. Many of you have mentioned you need to have your own dashboard. You need to be self-aware of what your trigger points are. These are just things that individuals need to think about. And of course, you need patience to be able to, take the time to actually appreciate different people. So these are just some certain things. And I know for anybody who does yoga, I've just got into it. One of the things we always think about is breathe, right? Before you react, especially if you're triggered, to be able to breathe, think about it, and seek to understand, as Simon Sinek speaks. So let's end with a poll, and we're going to take a little break after this and move to real-time challenges you're facing. This is our setup. We've talked about conditions that lead to incivility. We've talked about the consequences of incivility or disrespectful leadership. We've talked about how individuals contribute or get triggered by situations. And then we're going to go into real-time challenges right after this poll, and then we'll take a break. So here's the poll. In your mind, what are some triggers that cause you to act with incivility? I think we can all see it. Challenges. Actually, the words interrupting you, misinterpreting you. That last one, sorry, that.
Yeah,
like,
Gord, what's the last one?
Yeah, everybody forget the last one. I think it's you remember I'm an OAS. The C in me didn't pick that one up. So hey, it's yeah, I think that was from when we did the priority setting one. I overlapped it.
Oh,
So
yeah,
my
yeah,
mistake. Yeah. See, that's a self-acknowledgement, self-aware.
Right? It's all about that. It's all about that.
Well, and some of you have mentioned this, like for me, I always want to have some different styles to complement my my areas that I'm not so strong in, right?
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
for others, this is not about changing who you are, right? It's not like we're going to do electric shock treatments. People come with a certain style. It's not easily changed. What we're trying to encourage is that style will contribute to good governance and not inhibit it. Well, let's see. I think I can end the poll and I can share the results. This is an O doing this, right? Oh, saying just the words, right? And that could be, body language is important here too, right? So it could be words or body language, shrugs, that sort of thing. Misstating in their own words, interrupting you. And, less so maybe for our group, just challenging your views, which is kind of insightful. I mean, that's healthy for people to challenge us. I suspect it's how do they challenge us? How do they ask the question? So let's take a break. I think I can end that, stop sharing and close that. So we're going to take a little break, but over the break, I want you to think about, and this was sent out, what is a real-time situation of disrespectful behavior among council, among administration, between administration and council, doesn't matter. Pick one, because after the break, we're going to go and have good discussion and talk about preventive measures and remedial measures dealing with disrespectful behavior. So let's do a time check. It's kind of like a quick 7 minutes, good for everybody. 10 after, we'll come back and we'll give some guidance and we'll head to chat room. So 10 after, and I say 10 after because we're all over the country, so I'm not using the time. So 10 after, we'll see everybody back.
Thank you. Gordon, it's Joe from Rycroft calling.
Hey, how you doing?
Oh, pissed off. Pardon my French. This Zoom thing is not working well for me today, but we finally got on. How much have I missed?
Well, we're kind of halfway through.
Oh, see, is there any way I could get a paper printout of this review?
Well, I think Nate is recording it, so everybody will get a recorded copy. So you'll be able to see the first part. And if you
Good.
have you downloaded? Do you have the notepad for the session?
The notepad I've got was the questionnaires that you wanted us to get done.
Yeah, and there's some material there. Yeah. So yeah, so Nate is recording,
Yep.
so you'll be able
I've done
to
that.
yeah, that's awesome. Thanks, Nate, for doing that. And that way you can pick up on the part that you missed.
Sounds good.
Yeah, you bet.
Oh, what a mess.
You might want to mute yourself before you swear.
I'm going to have to.
Sorry, I had to jump off for a call. Are we taking a little break?
Yeah, you joined us
Okay.
just in time to break.
Well, I know I'm
We're
in a
back,
workshop,
Melissa.
but yeah.
10 after, we're back. So it's in about
Okay.
6 minutes, we're back. So 10 after.
Okay. No
Yeah.
problem. Thank you very
No
much.
worries. So what we covered, Melissa, and I think Joanne as well, we did just a quick overview of the personality, if you filled it out, and just debrief that, we all have different styles and we're triggered by different things, which causes maybe to do disrespectful behavior. And then
Absolutely.
after the break, we're moving to chat rooms where people will come up with real-time situations.
Okay.
And we can debrief those.
Okay. Super.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
And after.
Okay.
John, you were having trouble with your video, I think, earlier, weren't you?
Who?
Joanne.
Yeah. I think
Got a lot.
she's
I'm hearing crackling in that thing.
Oh, okay.
okay.
And Melissa, you're library, right? Are you do you know if you're the only library person here?
I'm
I
the only one.
believe so. Yeah, so we're part of a regional district,
Right.
and so we have our board members come from across the region, as well as a number of member municipalities. So we have a really terrific mix. I don't go to the board meetings very often, but so I think most of my challenges are probably more with members of the public, and yeah, but
Yeah.
we do see some incivility sometimes with members of the public, but rare, and thankfully, yeah, rare.
Yeah.
But lots of excellent lessons to be
Yeah. Well, you got lessons pretty close to home with the city of Kamloops, right?
Absolutely. Oh, that's
Well,
a
in the
whole
past,
other conversation, Gord.
yeah, and the past with TNRD as well.
That's
Past days, you know, I know Tracy's been up there working a couple times. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think everybody's back, Nate.
Yep, you're
Okay, cool. This is the part we enjoy the most because it's actually, you know, the setup. And now we're going to go with, I don't have a name for each group. Do people know which room they were in?
We're gonna find out.
Okay. So we're going to start with room one, but just give me one name from room one, or they don't know what room they were in. Nate?
I think we were room one.
room one.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't want to put Daryl on the spot, but we worked on Daryl's scenario. Is Daryl still here? I'm just looking around the gallery.
Who's still here? Room one was Daryl, Debbie, Joanne, Jody, Melissa, and Stratton.
Oh, wonderful. Thanks. Who's presenting from group one then? Hopefully, just a reminder, everybody, we needed to pick somebody who's willing to present. It's not a big speaking contest. We just need to get what was the issue and what did you come up with as preventive remedial strategies, so all of us can learn and maybe share some ideas. So group one. Anybody?
Daryl volunteered to bring it up, so we'll let him take the floor.
Oh, nice regulation, delegation. I don't know, it's called something, Joanne. Okay, Daryl, are you there?
Yes, sir, I am.
I'm gonna move to group two. Okay, Daryl, go.
Okay, the scenario that we have here is based on a Public Procurement Act in our province. As municipalities, we are bound by the restrictions of a Public Procurement Act, which says we have to, for all jobs that go over X dollars, we have to go to open public tender.
Okay.
However, there is a company in the province which does wonderful work in the area that hypothetically a town would want to have that work done, but they refuse to take part in the public tender. But they propose that they don't go into public tender because they're going to do better work and they're going to do it cheaper anyway. So the crisis here, the conflict here is, as a council and as a councillor, I need to look for the best possible value for dollar spent for my town, and I'm compelled under the Public Procurement Act to put it out to public tender, but possibly the best company to do this doesn't take part in a public tender. And the conflict then is, does council violate the Public Procurement Act and go with the other company? I know different provinces have different rules in regards to public procurement.
Okay.
Some of the ways we discussed that could solve the problem, or at least try to solve the problem, is to have an open forum meeting, a request for information, if you will, from the provincial government to sit with any municipalities that find themselves pondering themselves in this situation, along with companies that do take part in the public tendering process, companies that do not, and then have a discussion to see if there would be a happy medium to be placed there. A second possible, probably most basic one, would be to write to the provincial government, explain the situation to them, and then say, are we violating, or hypothetically, is the town violating the Public Procurement Act by spending X number of dollars without going through public open tender? And then you'd have that answer. And the third one, someone help me out here, because I believe there was a third one, and I'm drawing a blank.
Okay. Well, let me just kind of comment because I'm not hearing how this led to incivility or disrespectful leadership.
Well, hypothetically, you have a torn number of councillors.
Okay.
Because for very, very good reasons, they have differing opinions.
Okay. So we have a policy, in fact, legislation, where people have different views on efficiency, cost savings, and all that kind of stuff. And because of it, it's causing some differences of opinion that can lead to disrespectful behavior. And it is legislation. So in this case, Lisa, I'm going to go to Lisa. And okay, there's a piece of legislation. We disagree with it. It's causing internal problems. Any thoughts, comments on that one? And then we'll go to group 2.
I'm not sure if people are going to like my answer very much, but they probably can predict it. I think you need to comply with the legislation.
I knew you'd step up. Yeah.
Sorry.
And I think, well, and I think that's so it's within the group. They have to have that discussion of the consequences of not doing it. And I think, Daryl, your point was, you know, to satisfy the situation, you either try and change the policy or you adhere to it, right? So I think that group was okay.
Yes. Okay.
Let's go to group.
Now. Thank you.
Yeah, that's good. Let's go to group 2. Who's in that group? Nate?
I think I am Rachel Swenseed here.
Perfect, Rachel. I love it when people step up. Okay, what do you got, Rachel? What do you got?
I'm ready to go. Okay, so the example that we had was a counselor or counselors that continue to kind of lose their cool in council meetings. Yeah, I'm just gonna say lose their cool. And so preventatively, we had said that laying the groundwork for the meetings, talking about things like respect, code of conduct, giving the heads up to council members that, you know, we will be talking about could be a spicy topic. Again, this laying the ground rules of kind of that meeting, really clear consequences on like the code of what happens if people don't listen to the code of conduct. So really all about preparation preventatively for that to happen. But some people will still do it. We talked about, you know, everyone gets elected and sometimes they're just like spicy people who just are spicy. And so remedial, we said that have a discussion with that counselor after the meeting. This requires a strong chair and also clear consequences to if it continues to happen, clearly written out consequences to their behavior, and then also reiterating to the council as a whole that they've, you know, this is a safe space. Everyone needs to be able to share, but do it in a respectful manner, following the code of conduct.
Well done, Rachel. I'm going to go to 2 people. I'm going to go to a chair. Let's go to Mayor Pam to talk about how to prevent. And then I want to go to Lisa. When that doesn't work, remember, we always try and prevent, but at some point the horse is dead. You got to get off and take action. So let's go to Pam first. How do you deal with disrespectful behavior on a particular issue? And then if that doesn't solve it, then we'll go to Lisa to talk about ways to remedy it. Pam?
Okay, so I'm going to go really quickly because I got a number of things. So you first of all, you need to have a strong leader at the table. So we need to help our leaders be strong, especially your chair. You need to set the tone for the meeting or the committee, whatever it is. There will be no foolishness. I'm using my word, but you can use your word. You have to let everyone know clearly that it's a safe place. And it's really sad that we have to do this, but we do. We have to make sure everyone knows this is a safe place. We're all going to maintain our composure. You know, this is a hot topic button, whatever. You know, some topics we know they're going to cause a lot of disturbance. So let's just say what we have to say. I would say this as well, although I know people hate this one, but you know, I try to encourage. I used to get, I'm going to echo that. And then, you know, I got 7 people at the table saying the same thing. So we don't need anybody, and I say this respectfully, you don't need grandstanders. You don't need anybody repeating everything that's been said. It just causes angst and it causes other people to get ugly too, because it's just zip it. We already said that. So, and I say it nicely. I'm not very nice today. We've talked about Huh?
You are an A. I thought you were an O, but you're an A.
Oh, no, I'm an A. I'm an
Yeah.
A and a C, like completely. Code of conduct, we have to understand it. So that preventative, you've got to know what that code says, and folks have to sign it. And say, I'm responsible for that, and take time to go over it with council. Reminder of what council is all about. Sadly, some people still don't know what getting on council is about. There are no games. We're dealing with changing lives. We have to ensure that council's getting all the information so that they're informed and they're not feeling left out, which means, when I'm left out, not me, because I just don't care, but some people's personalities, when they feel like they don't have the information they need, they lash out. And so that, get them the information, they're accountable, and they're fully equipped, go public. And I was telling my group, and I know you hate it when I say this, but I'm going to tell my story. Like, I just had two at the table they're just nasty. It didn't matter what I did or what I said. And so I turned to them one day it was on TV, and I said, do I need to give you boys a timeout? Now, I learned I shouldn't say that, but understanding that we are being taped, that we're grown-ups at the table. Sometimes you have to tell people that, and how to prevent, get it in their head. And then I just said, I would say, if we can hold strategy days where council, you can't sit at the table and make decisions outside of the council table, but if you can sit together as a group and just kind of have everybody's voice, where nobody's grandstanding, nobody's watching except each other, you kind of come together a little bit better and you start to become a team. I know that's wishful thinking, but it's worked. It's worked before. And again, I go right back to that code of conduct if all else fails. So there's a million things to be preventative, but if you don't have a strong chair that's got the guts to say enough, like, that's not how we run this, you're gonna get rough shot.
Well, let's review a couple of key points. One, and then we'll go to Lisa. Hey, council as a whole will spend 100% of its time where? In a meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Where is it that we train people? I'm not talking about parliamentary procedure. I get that part, but to me, parliamentary procedure is your last call. It's just, how do we have a good meeting, right? That's where we're going to spend most. So where do we invest time on that? I think you mentioned the formal meeting, the business meeting, but you mentioned an informal time. Committee of the whole, often it's called a strategy session, where people can feel like they're heard. It's more casual. So a couple ideas there. Let's go. Okay, so we do our best. We have committee of the whole. Everybody knows proper protocol. We got a code of conduct. We've given people a heads up, and it still happens, Lisa. What do we do?
Well, the irony of the investigation is the recommendations are going to be about training, right? For the most part. So I want to go back to that again and talk about a few things that Pam touched on, which is, and you just talked about it too, practice, like allowing people to practice these skills, not in the moment of heat and emotion, but actually like learning how to engage and like shifting around who's the chair. Making maybe the person that is the one that is more of a hothead and more likely to lose their cool actually have to try to manage in a role play somebody else losing their cool as they learn and they teach somebody how to adjust their behavior. They then actually start to learn that too. So practice, and not just like you say the rules, but actually the difficult, uncomfortable moments in time that we need to speak up and be upstanders, effective ones. The next is using the tool of the debrief, which is something as the integrity commissioner, I have this opportunity to do. Like, people may come to me and ask for an informal resolution and say, this is what I observed. This is how a member of council was speaking, the tone that they were using with staff. I get an opportunity to have some conversations that isn't judgment. It isn't, sort of me trying to do blame and shame. It's actually supporting and coaching people to be more effective at their jobs. Like, I'm here as their coach, not their penalizer. So that is incredibly useful too. And then, okay, if all else failed and the conduct is ongoing and it's pattern of abusive behavior, then people do have to go to that blunt instrument of filing a complaint. of getting that on the record, of having it investigated, the lines being drawn of what is uncomfortable, difficult conversation and what flows into, again, sort of abusive behavior that violates code. And then council's got some tough decisions to make about what you do to fix it. And if you can't fix it, then you need to insulate people. It becomes a strange exercise where we wrap people in bubble wrap and remove people from having engagement with them because we can't change them, but we need to protect folks to create safe spaces. For me, the biggest preventative tool that I have in my tool chest is the publicity of the decisions that I make. And I know that other jurisdictions have different approaches to this. In British Columbia, we're very weak. It's like each municipality choose your own adventure. And many choose to not even have a code of conduct, never mind publish them. But City of Van has done something that I describe as courageous leadership, because not only do they have it and have the external integrity commissioner role, but any formal decision has to go on that website and the public can know and the media can know and they can do with it what they choose. So I think ultimately that's the end, is just transparency around the behaviors that need to be fixed.
Yeah, and I think in large part what you're both talking about, what I observe is how debates, we don't learn to debate. And so if we don't know how to debate, it becomes an argument. And when it becomes an argument, there's collateral damage, right? So again, let's preventive. Let's get people to know how to run a meeting, a respectful meeting, good debate. That's an investment. Sure, procedural bylaw, that's to me is the fallback. Maybe you have pre-meetings or you have casual meetings. You have perhaps coaches. And as a mayor, I think what you were saying, Pam, sometimes you have to take people aside. But not all mayors are strong. Let's face it. And everybody owns a meeting, not just the mayor or the reeve or the warden. So just a reminder to everybody should not accept disrespectful behavior, right? We should call it and take a time out. So, okay, let's go.
It's Joe Gordon.
Yeah, Joe. Sorry. Okay. I'm going to group 3, I think now.
Oh, okay.
Going to group 3. Joe, if you got something, we're not hearing you, so maybe just put it in chat. Group 3? Who's doing group 3? Who's in that group, Nate?
Okay. Now, can you hear me now? I think so. Yeah, group 3, we spoke about counselors showing lack of respect for staff. Sometimes it's also fellow counselors or past counselors, but mostly we talked about the lack of respect by a counselor for staff. Numerous, in which sometimes would lead, or almost always lead to the staff being offended and getting defensive and actually sometimes resigning. And we talked about training and various forms of training, even though we had to concede that some counselors aren't going to listen to the training anyway, no matter how often we do it. I thought one interesting idea was one council was looking at a peer review, that each counselor would review the other counselors without staff present. We talked about, training in things like navigating conflict, trying to get productive relationships, productive conversations, codes of conduct, and trying to get the how should I put it, get the counselor to talk about what they're actually trying to do, what they're trying to achieve, versus just standing on a fixed position of attack. Also, I think it was interesting the observation that most of our residents sometimes have trouble distinguishing between council and staff. They see it all as one, and if council is berating staff, then the residents just presume that the whole thing is dysfunctional. And finally, I think one of the other things that I heard is that it's very important to have a good relationship between the CAO and the mayor, to try to cut it off at the pass where possible.
Good one. Thanks, Peter. Thanks for sharing that. I'm going to go to Megan, sort of from an administrative point of view, observations when there's disrespectful behavior of an elected official towards staff, and then flip back over to Ian on maybe some ideas around this. But Megan?
I think you have to be sort of, as CAO, my strategy has always been that you need to guard your staff from that sort of reaction from council at all costs. And you need to stand up to that sort of feedback on behalf of the council. It's sort of that fierce leadership that we were talking about before. The buck ultimately stops with the CAO, and what the CAO allows is what will continue to happen at the table. As a CAO, it's having my strategy would be to have a one-on-one conversation with that counselor, with no one else participating first, and then conceivably escalating with having the mayor or the warden or whoever the lead of the counselor is, and try to make it more about, like, so what's really happening here? Because often that sort of that pushback or that anger is coming from a lack of understanding. It's a symptom of some sort of larger issue. The most important thing is to have zero tolerance as CAO, and to take it on behalf of the team and absolutely address it as soon as possible.
Right. And that's you're right. That's a fierce courage to be in that position. I see just in the news last week, a CAO was attempting to censor 3 counselors from talking to staff. Those are you want to kind of find the place to be able to take that action. Let's go to Ian on this whole kind of political administrative interface. Some thoughts around disrespectful behavior towards staff, especially even at a meeting.
I mean, I'll take Megan's comments and basically just say I'm into that. I think everything she said is very good. And when it comes to behavior and we're talking about strong mayors, not little s strong mayors and strong CAOs, about knowing the rules, modeling the rules, and the expected behavior right from the very beginning, which starts from training or orientation, understanding role clarity. I mean, sometimes the hazard, of course, is having those experts on council who choose to express their expertise in operations, and they ought not to be doing that, which generates frustration. But then in terms of, Pam was talking about some of the antecedent stuff, and I think it does have to start even with candidates. We sometimes do workshops for candidates running for council, just so that they know exactly what the job actually is. Because if I ask a councillor a year into their term, it's what they thought it was going to be, almost exclusively they say no. Usually it's around more time, it's higher level. I'm used to being on a working board rather than the policy board. And so those are some of the things that happen. The disinfectant that comes with the public viewing as well, the YouTubes, the broadcasting of meetings, those kind of things, I think happen. Media, if you've got media reporting on behavior, I think can be good as well. And actually, one of the early chapters in one of my books is about, I just titled it, "It's Never About What It's About." And that is getting to addressing the underlying symptoms of what the problem goes on. These people are human. They have homes and families and problems just like everybody else does too. So sometimes there are other aggravating influences. So style analysis, understanding each other, understanding kind of some of the personal history as human beings, I think is an important thing in being able to deal with this as well. But ultimately, if the problem persists, I think some of the things that we've already heard from a couple of people, not just on this question, but on other ones as well, are really important. That you nip it in the bud, you nip it early, you set expectations early, you have those bylaws, those policies, those covenants in place, and that you enforce them, so that the enforcement is against the piece of paper that's on the wall or in the binder. It's not an enforcement me against you in that particular case. So try and be a little bit more dispassionate about it as well, as another way to go, and have, particularly when it comes to the public, also having zero tolerance for abuse of elected officials or administrative officials in public and in private too.
Nice work. Yeah, that'll be hard on the issue or the impact versus the person. Wanted to, hey, I know you probably have a copy there, but chapter in which book there, Ian? Which book?
You sure?
Funny, I should say that, but which book is that? Yeah. There you go. Okay. The other element to this, let's reverse the flow though. Yeah, you're trying to figure it out. There it is. Give us the title. What's the name?
Sure, a couple of books. The first one I wrote is called Who's Driving the Grader, and that's about role clarity. Who's driving the grader and other governance questions. It was published by Municipal World in 2019. The next one actually is more resonant to this, perhaps. It's The DNA of Great Leaders, also published by Municipal World, but this one came out in 2022.
There you go.
Thanks so much for the unpromoted plug there, Gord.
Good little promo. Now, I want to reverse the flow, though. So, remember we talked about behaviors and triggers. So the reverse flow is sometimes staff lecture council. Okay. Sometimes staff are not providing adequate information. And sometimes they're not providing objective information. So we've been kind of picking on council, but sometimes it's actually administration, not equipping administration, training administration to how to effectively deal with elected officials. Another one that's come up, and I don't know if it'll come up on this one, but let's see if it does, and if it doesn't, we'll pick it up. And that's, how do you handle, it's not disrespectful information, but how do you deal with that frequent flyer that's always coming into administration to ask for information or give direction? So one of the groups doesn't cover that. We'll come back to that. Okay, let's go to, I think we're heading to group 4. Or I think we did 1, 2, and 3. Who's in group 4?
We have Amanda, Brian, Patrick, and Robin.
Okay, anybody from group 4?
They're all staying very quiet.
Okay, well,
so
are you stepping
I'm
up?
here.
That's
I said
great,
they're all
Robin.
staying very quiet.
Thanks, Robin.
So we had a couple scenarios, but we had a scenario that started out with what seemed to be a concern around motion not really reflecting actions of the administration. But I think through our conversations, what we really started to understand is that there were some communication issues between council and administration, and how council and administration could better communicate. And that was actually around sort of the CAO. So their scenario was that there was a concern by a councillor that the motion was not accurately reflecting the work that was being done, and he wanted that to be addressed. And he wanted to know how that was going to be addressed, and hadn't really been able to get an answer to that. We gave some suggestions about reaching out to the CAO and perhaps expressing concerns and trying to find some guidance to it. And what came out was the CAO's response was all inquiries of council need to go through the mayor. And so that's where we got to that perhaps the issue isn't really about motions and proceedings, but it's about communication and how communication flows in the organization. Good
one. Often we use, and then I'm going to come back to Megan, because I think it might be a good one for her to touch, and Pam, so set up. But often we think of the council staff relationship as an hourglass, and the CAO is right in the middle, right? You know, sort of that pivot point. But what we need to rethink is it's actually 2 overlapping circles. I hope I'm expressing this right, right? And so it's a team that goes this way. And so this whole idea of, because I think another group was talking about, can a counselor talk to staff? And if we're not going to pick that up, we need to talk about the protocols. Do you have a protocol in place around how a counselor can ask questions, seek information, but that does not cause work or lead to a direction? We'll send out some guidelines for that. But let's go to Megan around, counselor requests, and what kind of guidance do you have in Huron County for counselors seeking information?
Really good. So you know, when we have new senior managers come on board, one of the things that I do as CAO is sit down with them and actually do a training session with them on what happens if you get that phone call, if you get that email, and we role play a little bit in relation to the individual situation. Now, generally speaking, the rule of thumb is we work for, in our case, 15 members of council and not one member of council. So we require a majority vote of council in order to respond to more information, a report being written, specific direction. If it's happening consistently, I interpret it that this member of council doesn't feel as if they have access to the CAO, or there's some communication challenges between the two individuals, and the CAO needs to reach out to that member of council again to figure out what's really happening here. But absolutely, for sure, the sitting down with members, obviously members of council obviously receive this training when they first come on board as well. But I also have the senior staff within the municipality go through the training with me as well, so that we don't have these frequent flyers that sort of fly under the radar and then creates a bigger issue for the municipality down the road, because it can be a really big issue, you know, just a one-off here, a one-off there, a one-off. And also the CAO needs to know what the heck's going on too. And we respond to a majority vote of council, not one individual who happens to be an A or an O at the table.
Yeah. Now, Megan, do you have a casual trigger point when it's just a simple question?
For sure. That. If it's a simple question, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. If it then I think it's important for staff and for council to feel as if they have an opportunity to go back and forth. If there are frequent flyers, though, is, you know, the question in the back of my mind is there an issue with the reports that we are bringing forward, that they aren't capturing what the members of council are specifically looking for? My preference is always for interactions to be in the public record. If there are frequent flyers, right, it needs to be part of the public record. So monitor for sure, even the small ones. But generally speaking, if it's going to require significant effort on behalf of staff, that needs to come to the council table. And I will tell both staff members that, and I will tell the individual council members that, and, you know, being sort of fierce about that as well.
Well, and again, you know, often we're talking about council today, but I think equally we're talking about administration.
Absolutely.
Because you have one staff person who always drops everything to deal with a council intensive information request or whatever. And then you have others who say no. Then you begin to have an inconsistent. And what happens is we actually like the person who is allowing a disruption of the work program. So point here, have some guidelines. I think I know Huron County has some responsibility guidelines which outlines this. And for those who new to Municipal World sessions like this, we always have a care package that we send out, including a recording of the session that Nate's doing. So we'll put a set of roles and responsibilities in, which kind of covers this interface. I think that might cover that one. Any observations, Pam?
No, I think she covered it well. We do the same thing. It's a motion at the table. We have all of our directors come in to the committee of the whole. Everybody has to read all the information. First, if you have a question for staff, ask them. Our CAO is very easygoing when it comes to this. You never direct as a council, you never direct staff. You do that at the table through motion, like Megan was saying. You don't want to cause them any work, and staff is it's very difficult for them to say no to an elected official. So let's not do it. Our CAO is always available, and he's made that abundantly clear. Here's my cell phone, here's my, like, 24/7, drop in anytime, ask directors or staff any questions you want that does not cause them to do work. If you've got a simple question, and he doesn't even need to know. So my question would be, you don't have to answer it. If a CAO is not allowing any elected official to talk to staff on any front, or are they being control freaks? It causes them more work, and you're saying you don't trust your staff to know what to do, but some of them are simply trying to protect staff. So
yeah, there's multiple reasons for that hourglass to get plugged.
yeah,
Lack
exactly.
of competence, maybe they're protecting staff. Daryl, I think we answered the question. We're going to send out some roles and responsibility guidelines that actually kind of have a process of how to escalate. You know, if a counselor asks a person a question and then it becomes a bigger question, you need to escalate it to the CAO. And what we heard Megan say is then if it's bigger, then you need to get it to council. So we'll send out a copy of that. Great.
Can I pop in a supplementary question here? And that's
Absolutely.
where we are anticipating people of goodwill here. There are those who are sitting around a council bench who may just be malevolent by nature, trying to make a point and just asking questions because they want to play gotcha with administration and make them feel bad.
Right.
In which case they're not going to follow due process. Megan, how do you deal with that sort of thing?
Yeah. So, well, that's a good one because it happens at a council meeting, Ian. Yeah. Any thoughts on that, Pam? On the let's embarrass staff with that question?
Yeah, that would happen. They'd probably get half their sentence out, and that's it. Because as the chair, I will protect staff on every level, and I would just say, you know what, let's ask that at another time, or let's allow staff to get prepared with an answer. I am very gentle, but I think they get the message.
But firm. And it could also be the CAO, because not all mayors are the same, saying, good question, whatever. Good question. Let's get back to you at the next meeting if that's the will of council, right? So there's two ways we can deal with that malicious.
Yeah, something that I would do, Gord, is I would actually look for a motion from council for a report back on it. And usually if there is only one individual who is continually making noise, they don't get the majority and they pick up the signal and it quiets things down.
Nice. Some good strategies. Yeah. And we're picking up some in chat as well. Let's go to group 5. We've got 2 more, and then we're going to wrap up with some practical, insights from each of our guests around 4 different areas. So let's go to group 5. Who's in group 5, Nate?
Gavin, Liz, Rachel, and John Cunningham.
Great.
You already went.
Yep. Did you already do 5?
Rachel went under number 2.
Oh, okay. Okay. Who's in group 6 then? Who hasn't had a chance to bring forth a challenge?
6 ahead: Cindy, Heather, Sandy, Shyla, and Trevor.
Great. What do you got?
That's me, Sandy.
Okay. Go.
So the scenario was actually a matter that went before council. It was a report was taken to council about the end of our paratransit contract coming forth, and staff brought it forward asking for a decision. Do you want to go the RFP route for a new contract, or do you want us to look at bringing it in-house? Because initial estimates, we're looking at a 20% savings in bringing it back in-house. So direction was to bring a report back about bringing it back in-house. The report was brought back to committee, and the committee accepted it and moved it on to council. And once it got to council, committee only has half the members of council. Council is all of them. One member of council basically questioned the reliability of the figures that were provided. by staff, really calling into their integrity into question by saying, can this really be right? They got a few people on board with them, but it was also arrived at that the same time was moving away from the current contractor to bringing it back in-house. There was a large population of the community who used the system who questioned about the drivers. They had a lot of empathy and they wanted the drivers, they resistant to change, basically. They didn't wanted to make sure that the drivers came along and they were, like their family and so on. And so we had a little bit of a split on council. So one of the things that we looked at maybe about preventing it is to do some more do some pre-consultation and pre-discussion with the patrons earlier on, as well as the drivers, our current union drivers under our conventional system, as well as have some discussion with the drivers under the contractor, just to see if there were anything that could be presented or could be stopped and the information presented in a different way in the report to council. It was made quite clear in the presentation that there would be savings of 20% bringing it in-house, and that going through an RFP process would require the RFP process to be completed. So that was presented early on, even though it was the decision or direction to bring back the option to go in-house. We didn't anticipate the emotional side that would be coming with it. So that's what we have to do, be a little bit better with. So part of the remediation was we need to go back to council and talk about, we have direction always to look at saving money. So how important is saving money versus the community satisfaction or reaction that we're getting? So the empathy side. And so maybe we need to go back and have that discussion with council ahead of these types of things, and also tie it back into their priority or strategic parts. You said something, there was something said earlier on, it might have been you, Gordon, about learning to debate versus the argument. So I think that was part of what needs to happen as well, because the members of council who brought up or questioned the figures, it appeared to be done with intention to discredit.
Right.
So a debate is a good, healthy thing, but an argument against staff is not a positive reflection on council. So knowing their roles and responsibilities versus, or with regard to the priorities, setting priorities, and is it about the money or is it about satisfaction of the community? We need to ensure that there's post decisions, there's consistent messaging, even though it was a 5-4 vote.
Yeah, I'm going to maybe stop you there, Sandy, because I want to just stay with the behavior, not the issue. So what we heard, let's be clear, Pam, every councillor has a right to ask a question. Every councillor has a right. Now, here's the thing, and I'm using the C hat right now. There are Cs who can paralyze any decision by constantly asking questions. But nevertheless, every councillor has a right to ask a question. But it's all of council that directs staff to then answer that question. So that's a little technique. So that councillor can say, I know they may have said it in a bad way, Sandy, but hey, do we need to validate these figures? I want these figures validated. Thank you very much. Council, do you want to have these questions, the figures validated? I think you made another point casually that Pam has highlighted. So I want to come back to Pam on the more informal discussion so that people are informed before they get to the debate. And that's the idea of the committee of the whole. So I'm going to want to come to Pam on that. And I don't have a copy of the book, but hey, Ian, One of the things is if we don't have clear priorities, I wrote a book called What's on First Base, which is all about priority setting. Then we're going to be jumping all over the place, that inconsistency, Sandy, that you mentioned. But let's focus on this, almost like this more casual time. Pam, tell us how that works a bit. And what are some parameters around it?
So are we talking about committee of the whole?
Yeah, I think so. Or strategy session, or some
okay.
priorities and something.
Okay, so two different things. So a strategy session, I just think even the training that you provide, Gord, we're sitting in a casual place where everybody, you always ask everybody, which I do at my table, you know, what do you think? Where are you? People need to feel like they belong. And I think the people that lash out the most feel like either they're not informed or they can't keep up or those types of things. And so we just want everybody to understand everybody has a place at the table, you know, with good behavior. Everybody has a place. I have one that always asks money questions, one that is so analytical, one that thinks of the less fortunate, that type of thing. So everybody has a really is gifted at the table. So to be able to sit down and chat and figure that out amongst yourselves in a don't let anybody see me is tremendously important. I'm not talking about in camera and secret meetings. I'm talking about just a conversation. The committee of the whole is different. The committee of the whole we do one a month, and it is the meeting before the council meeting. So 2 weeks before the council meeting, we have a committee of the whole. It's council. That's where staff comes in. That's where we ask for more information on things if we want it. You know, everything's on the table, so that the next 2 weeks before you get to council, where you ratify, basically you're just ratifying what went through committee of the whole. We call it second sober thought. So you've got 2 weeks to figure out, you know, did I need more information? Did I vote yes to this, but I really don't believe in it? You know, 2 weeks is a long time for us to get more information and feel differently. So I think it's the best safety measure that a council can have, to have a committee of the whole and that second sober thought. So that's wide open. Yeah.
Helpful, Megan, helpful for staff to have committee of the whole. And then we'll see what Patrick has.
Yeah, we had that system in place, Pam, for years, and I think we moved away from it a couple of years ago. And I think, you know, doing things like making sure that you're using consent agendas, that you're not, you know, wasting time on reports that aren't important, and that the focus truly is on the issues that need to be at the table. And for the CAO and for the mayor to really be careful about structuring the meeting so that the conversation, like information reports, but decision reports, that's where the focus is. And so whether it's having the committee of the whole and then the council meeting, or whether it's about structuring each agenda so that the topics that are most important are getting in front of council and they feel as if they have the time to talk about it, really is crucial. The other thing that I would say, and Gord isn't even telling me to tell you this, but truly doing strategic priority setting with your council, the beginning, the middle, and then doing the ongoing check-ins makes all the difference in the world, because they know intuitively exactly what staff are working on, and they feel that confidence because there's really good information and communication flow. Then, you know, that I think gives a certain level of confidence that alleviates some of the pressure that I have seen in other municipalities. Again, Gord didn't even tell me to tell you.
You know, I was going to leave that one for Ian, but I am going to come back to Ian on the importance of strategy. But before we go there is a caution of committee of the whole, and we've got Patrick with his hand. I want to say very clearly, got to avoid like the plague that the committee of the whole becomes a dress rehearsal for the meeting. This
absolutely.
has been a major issue, I think, across the country, where committee of the whole, actually the decision is baked, and then we have a mock meeting, and really all the real good discussion has already occurred. So in my mind, the committee of the whole is where new issues come up and we unpack them so we're clear. Where work in progress, back to Sandy's point, I think it was Sandy, we see, are we kind of reasonably in the same wavelength on this? And maybe that's where we invite guests or stakeholders. Patrick, and then just want to come back to Ian to wrap up priorities and see if we've got another group before we hear from each of our guests. Patrick, you've got a quick question or comment?
Thank you, I do. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you bet, Patrick.
Committee of a whole, is that typically, and I'm throwing it out there to everybody, is that open to the public? Is because
yes, short answer is yes.
It is?
Yeah.
Okay,
short answer,
then
yes. Yeah.
Where and when can we have like a discussion, like a staff meeting? I'm retired and then I came to this job, but we had staff meetings where obviously it wasn't an open forum like council is there, but we used to have committee of a whole where it was just you get together with your directors and the managers and so on like that, and then you openly discuss what's coming down the pipe. But when you have a committee of a whole, where and when do you get that privacy where you can talk and say, Gord, you're full of shit. Let's talk about this. I don't think this should be done that way. What other ways is there? And of course, you can do that in the public there, but I'm just thinking of when can you have a staff meeting without somebody looking over your shoulder?
You mean a council with staff? You're talking about?
Yeah, just council with staff. I guess.
Yeah, you can have a staff meeting anytime you want. Yeah. So every province, legislation is very clear. Anytime you have a quorum of council, right? You're in a meeting. You need to be in the public, unless you fall under the legislation around going in camera. And this is an issue all across the country of where do councils have frank discussion with staff in a comfortable area. It's a big issue. Yeah. And many are doing it. I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not sure that Lisa's too familiar with this area, but I might try Lisa. But all across the country, I think the advice, not legal advice, that I give people, if you're in committee of the whole, the key that Pam said is you're not making decisions.
Yes, right.
One could argue that you're having a discussion. This would be a clerk's argument, that you're having a discussion that will lead to a decision at some point. So my best advice is talk to legal counsel, talk to your peers, because all across the country, people are doing committee of the whole, but they're calling it something else. They're calling it priorities committee, strategic committee. So they're giving it a different name because, quite frankly, committee of the whole has got a bad name across the country as a dress rehearsal. Let's go to Ian.
Thank you.
On the importance of strategy, and then I'm not sure if we're still missing a group, and then want to go round table.
Can I jump in though, Ian? Because Gordon, you had said something about
I didn't want to dismiss you. I was giving you that kind of
No,
what are you thinking, Lisa?
The supreme irony is that last week we published a bulletin on exactly this topic on
Wonderful.
Our Vancouver. We issue formal decisions, but information bulletins on topics such as that, and so we just produced one on the open meeting principle. And there's sort of a checklist of like, if it meets these attributes, you're in trouble if you're not doing this in a public forum or you're not closing it properly. So if anybody wants to fall asleep reading a bulletin, it's on the City of Vancouver Integrity Commissioner site.
Well, and you know what, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to send out a care package. So far we've got roles and responsibilities. We've got some decision-making guidelines. We've got the open meeting principles, and we'll make sure, and the recording, of course. So we'll make sure everybody gets some insights to that. Thanks. Ian, and then we'll see if we got one more group, and then want to go roundtable to our guests. We got some other key topics we want to cover. Ian?
Sure.
No other
I had a city manager in BC refer to this concept as you can't have a discussion that advances an issue on the path towards the decision. And so that was his Cole's Notes version of it. And I thought it was relatively easily understood. Getting back to the comment about strategy, to me, this ought to be all about strategy. So it's either the decisions ought to be something that are referencing the strategy that council created, meaning their collective expression of success over the course of this term and beyond. And I ask people, why do your grandkids live in town? And so that's kind of where the strategy piece goes. And so that's like the minor part of what council does in terms of decisions. The major part, of course, is the other 85% of municipal business that just keeps the place going, most of which is under the purview of the CAO through the budget and delegated responsibility. So I do say to council, using their vision, their mission, their values, is this a decision you ought to be making that advances the plan that you created? If the answer is yes, great. If the answer is no, then let's reflect on it a little bit further because the environment may have shifted, or maybe it's a decision we ought not to be making on this particular topic. So I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, good point, Ian. Thank you so much. Let's and hopefully I wanted to make sure we spent time on the topics that you brought up. And we've just got a quick question. In your view, this is a poll. What processes and practices promote incivility? Actually, I think I'm going to just skip. Yeah, there's our poll. There it is. So given everything we've talked about, what do you think are practices or processes that promote it, actually kind of trigger incivility? And let's see what our participants think. And then we're going to hear each of our guests talk about legislation. Lisa's going to start us off. We probably have a little less time, by the way, everybody, than we thought. We've got about 20 minutes left. So Lisa's going to talk about investigations. Megan's going to talk about just thinking about personal mindset. Pam will talk about codes because she's chairing a committee in Nova Scotia. And then I'm going to end with the idea of doing regular, and Ian's going to talk about practices. Sorry, Ian's starting us off. Some good practices. And then I'll end with the idea of a check-in. So let's, I think I'm going to share this. Let's see what we've got to share the results. So people are saying, what are some significant areas if we are kind of doing a check-in? Role clarity seems to be up there. Disrespect, of course, we've talked about that quite a bit. We have mentioned meeting decorum and poor internal communication. So there's some kind of significant areas that we need to think about. And that's a great prompt to hear from each of our wonderful guests who have taken time to be with us today. I want to start with I think I'm out of queue here. This is for Ian. And then legislation's next. Sorry, I just messed that up. Ian, a minute or so on what do you think are some good practices and processes that maybe the opposite, let's go with the positive, promote civility in your view. You could do the opposite if you want.
No, I want to do this. I want to talk about what works. So I kind of divided them up into 4 different segments. And given the time available, I might just cut my notes and stick them in the chat and people can look up more detail if they want.
Thanks for that.
So to me, the first is kind of if we think about the start, it's the orientation, onboarding of council with administration and the regular ongoing refreshers of governance type concepts. So there's a bunch under that. I think it's also understanding for council anyway. It's understanding each other as people, as human beings with complex histories. There was a time when we saw disagreement in council because the mayor and another member of council used to get into fights by the bike racks behind school 30 years ago. So if you didn't know that, it would be missing context. So knowing each other as people. The third, I think, is that interpersonal piece. We're all humans. This is a fundamentally human enterprise. We come with our own ideas and biases and knowledge and history. So taking those sorts of things into account and knowing that councillors tend to be type A people, not wilting violets. So that, I think, has an impact as well. The fourth thing I'd say, and we talked about this quite a lot, is having the rules and using the rules. And the rules are something we can debate, but we're not arguing with people. And the rules can be about council, about meetings, about the chair, CAO, the chair, mayor, warden, or about the role of administration from CAO. We talked about how people can, whether and how members of council can speak to members of administration. So Gord, very Cole's notes, and I could speak for another hour, but I'll just stick it into the chat.
Well, and I think those are great 4 areas, and I think it still comes back to your last point. If you don't have something to touch, like a document, a policy, a guideline, then you're going to be focusing on the individual. So it behooves all of us to have good codes of conduct, good roles and responsibilities, good meeting guidelines, et cetera. Thanks for that, Ian. And I know we wanted to take time for everybody to have good group discussion. And so, we've kind of appreciate our guests are kind of cutting to the chase. Well, let's go to Lisa, because everything Ian talked about was maybe how to prevent it, but some insights on, okay, it didn't work, legislation around this and investigation. So some thoughts, Lisa.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of shocking that you can look across the country and see a myriad of approaches to this issue, that it seems like there's common space with all the folks that are on this conversation about the issues that are coming up and the struggles within. So why we have such a hodgepodge out there is a little bit mind-boggling. I'm going to come from the British Columbia space here, where, like I said, it's been left to your own adventure, which I think is the most unfortunate of all. If I could tip my hat, it would be to Ontario, which maybe for some feels like a whole lot too much, but the consistency of that external person, that integrity commissioner doing the work, it's really vital. That these organizations cannot, they can't police, and I hate that word, but they cannot police the elected officials. They're not equipped to do so. And they're not unique in that. There's like other spaces where it's similar, whether it's the board of directors or the CEOs. It's impossible for HR to investigate the board of directors. It doesn't work. And the fix has to be some external mechanism where there is a space that these things can be investigated. But ultimately, again, I kind of sound like a broken record. If there's an investigation and it hides in the shadows, what's the point? So you have to have not just the complaint resolution procedure, but you have to have some transparency and accountability around where there are findings that there is unethical conduct that's occurring that's problematic. I think the legislation around civility is particularly complex when we're dealing with staff, because we really find it in 2 regimes, and we find it within this world of codes of conduct or integrity commissioners for the elected officials. But then we find it in occupational health and safety legislation and the policies specific to the employees in the organization. And I think that's really challenging. Because we may end up with 2 distinct processes addressing the same issue. And I got to tell you, investigations are incredibly hard on people, and they are often the hardest on those that are in some space of vulnerability. And so, a conflict and a complaint council to council member or public to council member is one dynamic. A complaint that involves council to staff has a very different kind of approach, because of the dichotomy of power, vulnerability, and the possibility of retribution. So I think that's complex, and we need to turn our minds to the fact that the investigation tool itself, while designed to create safe spaces for people, is actually an inherently unsafe process for most as you walk through it. So something to be conscious of there. I hate investigations, which is highly ironic, because it's sort of what I'm supposed to do. But if we can spend more time on exactly what we talked about today, advice and prevention and education, then hopefully we have less of those moments in time that the blunt instrument is used.
Well done. And one of the things I see, everybody was required to get codes of conduct. So we stole one from somewhere else and copied it and put our name on it. But now I'm seeing an evolution of making codes of conduct work. So I saw 3 just in the last 2 weeks where they've removed council from investigating its peers or self. And so I think we're seeing more of that. A good friend of mine who's also a lawyer says, be careful what you wish for. If it goes to an investigation, it becomes public. And now we're doing our laundry in public. I'm going to end with how we can do our own laundry, but stay tuned. We're going to cover that. So let's go to codes, because I know, personal approach. Any thoughts for staff or elected officials, just what we need to do. It's easy to blame the process, blame other people, but any thoughts around our own personal approach to being respectful or dealing with disrespectful behavior? Megan?
Yeah, I'd say the number one thing, I'm also being pretty sensitive to time. So I'll say, you know, my number one tip is to try to keep emotion out of the picture. I know it's really hard to do that, but truly sticking just to the facts and understanding, I think, whether or not staff are elected to their positions, the reality is that this is a political environment in which we work, and understand that it's not personal, it's not about you as an individual, and to have the confidence in your integrity to be okay with that, and to have the confidence not to bring your emotion to the table and just stick with the facts. That is the number one thing. And you know, through all of the tools that we've talked about here today, the many, whether through Ian or Gordon or Pam or Lisa, you know, there are all kinds of tools that you can use that will allow you to systematically move through some of the challenges, but truly to keep your emotions checked.
Yeah, that's a personal. Well, let's remind our participants, we've got code of conduct. Daryl's offered one up. Thanks, Daryl. So we'll make sure, I should have my email, but I'll make sure it's at the end. We're going to have some roles and responsibility that talk about that elected official staff interface. We've got decision-making guidelines, and Lisa's got the open meeting guidance, so around meetings. And we'll end with a governance check-in tool. But before we go there, code of conduct, or codes or legislation. Pam, what's some of the insights from Nova Scotia on the committee that you're working with?
Yeah, so where I chair the code of conduct working group for the entire province. So with regard to municipal leadership, so we had. I want to say we had nothing, because every unit either had a code of conduct or they didn't have anything. And there's nothing worse than, you know, this happens to your neighbor and this happens to you, two different set of rules. So we just decided we had to get together and do something. The number one comment we got was, there is no teeth in the code. You can do what you want. And what do you get? A slap on the wrist? Sounds like most of our courts these days. So right now we started in January 22. We're like almost 2 years in, just about done. One more round of consultation. So in a nutshell, we did application piece, which would be the one code for all Nova Scotia municipalities. So it's standardized. We put in things like it's not meant to silence anybody. Under content, I can't go through it, but we have 43 provisions to go by. Under sanctions, we covered sanctions, making sure that if a council is going to dole out a sanction, they have to go through 7 considerations first. So it's just not, I don't like you, so I'm going to lay the smack down. Can't do that, right? It has to be fair. And then there were 13 sanctions. Oh gosh, from writing a letter to, you know, there's some sanctions there. Yeah. And then we covered complaint and investigation process, because it has to be standardized. It has to be easy and accessible. And then training, which I friggin' love. Like, you are responsible and accountable for the knowledge that you have. You can't pretend, oh, I didn't know, which some people say. So, you know, we're talking about an online module, because people will say, well, I can't travel. To be done 30 days after being sworn in, like get it done. Now you're accountable for what you know. And we will take a review, look at a review in 3 years later to see how it's working, because you can always do better. But we'll have something with teeth that's standard, that says, you know about it, stop playing games, or you'll have to deal with mama.
I just see, I see Lisa smiling. And I love what I'm hearing, because often what I'm hearing right across the country, right or wrong, is codes of conduct are being weaponized to silence differing opinions, right? So great to see. We're still trying to figure this out, right? and just make it better. So I want to come to what this is all about, just to kind of wrap us up in these final minutes. I already mentioned, if we're not aligned with our behaviors and expectations, we waste a lot of energy trying to do the priority works that Ian talked about, trying to deliver good services. And one of my experiences has been, we end up doing our laundry. You got to work with my photos here. Okay. We end up doing our dirty laundry where? In public. And so it prompted me years ago to think about how we could help councils take care of their own laundry. So we worked with about 20 councils, and we developed a checklist, which I'll share with you, with the idea that, here's the thing. Sometimes I'll hear somebody say, hey, we need a timeout, let's have a check-in. And then they have the downward spiral, I call it the toilet conversation, everything that's wrong. But could we have a checklist to say, what does good governance, what does a good organization look like? So it's a simple list. It doesn't have a lot of criteria. It's a simple list, and look at what it says. It's all the stuff we've been talking about. Do we have clear roles? Do we have good communication? Do we have good information? Are we making good decisions? So notice this is kind of not earth-shattering. It's probably the result of a good orientation session that Ian talked about, right? These are, what you talk about. But how do you use it? So I'll talk about that, and we've already done this poll, so let me kind of continue. So the idea that I'm advancing, and I think all of our guests, Lisa's been talking about prevention, Ian's been talking about it, committee of the whole, those kind of, Pam's been talking about, Megan's been talking about. Every once in a while, you got to stop the busyness and do a check-in. Just say, how are we doing? Now, when we do that, we need to be, and I'm going to come back, I forget who said it, this is a little different. Because if I'm doing it with my CAO, remember the 3 L's for going in camera? What are they? Land, legal, labor. The 4th one, jokingly, is laundry, okay? But if my CAO is in the room, I can actually go in camera. Everybody good, right? Because I'm giving feedback to my CAO. And I can say, hey, what's working well? And I like what Lisa was talking about, is we should celebrate what's working okay so that we don't lose it. But we can also talk about, hey, are there areas for tension? Well, in this example, and I'll just, it happens to be, we're advancing a committee of the whole. I don't know how that worked, but anyway, they were saying we don't have enough time where we just strategize, we just share ideas, we blue sky without getting quoted in the paper. So now the thing is, if you do a check-in and then don't follow up, it's absolutely a waste of time. You would have been better to have not checked in. Well, in this case, they said we want more opportunities. And so they reviewed the committee of the whole. Remember that Pam was talking about, Megan, to make sure it wasn't a dress rehearsal. We'll send a format, but instead of a request for decision, I know how many of you probably have some staff report that you present to council for them to make a decision. Here's the options, here's the recommendation, here are the implications. Well, some years ago with good friend George Cuff, we actually developed what I call the what are you smoking form. In other words, what are you thinking? So staff have an opportunity to say, we have no idea what you just punted to us. You want something on affordable housing? Is that social housing? Is that market housing? Is that employee housing? We haven't got a clue what you're thinking about. So it'll be in the package, but it's called the request for direction. So what are you thinking so that we can prepare good information? And the final thing they did is said, we're not going to do this ad hoc. We're going to actually have a schedule. Better to not have the committee of the whole meeting than to try and schedule one. So they have one, I think, Pam, somebody said once a month they have one. So I want to end kind of with this notion of what a lot of you have been saying, a lot of our guests have been saying, is every once in a while, we ought to get out of the busyness of what we're doing take a time out with our CAO. Notice it's with our CAO, okay? If it's without your CAO, you probably have a different issue, okay? And just check in and say, how are we doing? What's working well, areas for tension, and how can we enhance? I think it goes back a little bit to Lisa's point. How do we do our own laundry before it has to go to investigation and integrity commissioner? So back to our thoughts, and let's just, I know we're kind of tapping out for time. We'll put that in the package, but maybe just see if anybody's got a cue. And let's go to our guests, just some closing comments. I'm going to start with, let's start on the West Coast. You know, that means you, Lisa. Any closing comments, Lisa?
One thing to leave us all with, because we've talked a lot about council and orientation, but if we know employees have struggled with change as well, new council's coming on, what about a little bit of training for the staff too? That is like setting them up for success to manage the change and not just put up the walls. Yeah. Like maybe this is a two-way street to set up a completely new organization, which it is, for the best approach to success.
Awesome. Often, you know, I see training around, it's black and white, the role of council, the role of staff. And I think it's all about navigating the gray. So how, and it's called political acuity, political savvy, and it happens at all levels. Good point. Let's work east, and Ian, some closing comments.
Sure. First of all, fascinating conversation from everybody. And it's interesting to me how consistent the topics are from coast to coast to coast. So that's both good, I suppose, and bad. A couple of things that didn't come up as much as I thought they were would be the impact of conspiracy theories, the use of social media, particularly things like rant and rave on Facebook that is fomenting a lot of these topics as well, which is kind of leading into the questions. So talking about how we have to deal with some of those things. Ultimately, that's on the citizen, but in the meantime, it is on council to be behaving properly and to raise the expectation, raise the bar so that citizens can see their government operating properly. I'll just leave it at that.
Wow. Yeah, you're right. And I think it all comes back to this idea that if we can identify topics, because it's deep, right? We can only take one at a time. That's why I like the idea of check-ins, because it can be the council staff interface. It can be our meetings are too long that's causing frustration, and just, yeah. Or how do we deal with social media? Yeah, all those things. Good point, Ian. Working east, Megan.
Yeah, I'd say, you know, for me, one of the takeaways is just a reminder of the importance of good, as you say, Gord, political acuity and also emotional intelligence in leadership roles anymore. And I think, you know, all of the discussions that we had here today, it's, you know, it's a pretty solid reminder that it's not just about the hard skills, it's also a lot about, and I don't like the term soft skills because, you know, they're also very hard, but the people part of things, you know, in terms of practice, you know, it's crucial that you model the behavior, that you are flawless with your integrity, that you focus on transparency in the work that you do. And remember that how, when, and what you communicate, both on the record and off the record, really, really matters.
Good points. And you're right. That's why I think we call it people skills now, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
The human element. Moving to the East Coast, Pam, closing comment.
Yeah, I guess we have to remember what we're each at the table for, what we got elected for. Make the right decision for the right reason, nothing else. And, you know, integrity. Where's your integrity meter? This is not about playing games. This is people's lives that we're making decisions on. And we just need to not play games and maybe put our big girl and big boy panties on, because there's some childish behavior at some big tables.
Wow. Haven't heard that one from you before. So I've just ended, of course, there I did a typo. That's the C coming, let's see. So if you've got anything to share, this is what this whole thing's about. Here's my proper email, which is McIntosh@shaw.ca. I've still screwed it up, but anyway, .ca. But if you got something to share next week with Nate's help, thanks, Nate, for all the behind the scenes. We'll put together a care package. We got some items from Lisa. I know Ian's got something. Too early to hear from Nova Scotia on that stuff, but that was an awesome list that we were hearing from Pam. So look forward to that. So just send us your stuff. It's all about sharing and maybe bragging a little bit. Thanks everybody for taking part of your day. Thanks for joining us. I think the whole point to everything we've talked about is there's no magic, right? It just takes constant attention. And I want to thank Pam, thank Lisa, thanks Megan, thanks Ian, good friends. Thanks Nate for being behind the scenes, and have a super evening wherever you are.
Yeah,
and thanks for joining us with Municipal World. Take care,
on behalf of Municipal World, I want to thank you, Gordon. Thank you for your guests, Ian, Megan, Pam, Lisa. Thank you for everyone that attended. I know there's some correspondence with some people that had some struggles getting in. The recording will be made available tomorrow. Any issues, feel free to shoot us an email. You can email me directly, Nate, Nate, @municipalworld.com. But thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Don't forget, send anything you want to brag about, send it, and Nate will get the recording out tomorrow, but hey, I'm a C, so I'm not a C, so I'll get our stuff out next week. Okay, take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great time.
Yeah,
Bye.
be good.
Good to see everyone. Bye.
Bye for
Thanks,
now.
friends.